After a relatively slow start to the Xbox Series X era, I wouldn't quite go as far to say that Xbox was desperate for a win, but they certainly were due and got one with Hi-Fi Rush. Now, don't go thinking that any game can get away with the shadow drop they pulled after the developer direct, but in this case, it worked, and the Tango Gameworks title published by Bethesda is fun and totally worth a play. As for myself, I wouldn't go quite as far as calling this a Game of the Year contender, although I understand why some people would give it a nomination. I'll explain as I dive into this review of Hi-Fi Rush. Hey, Danny with the DMGT here for all your music, video game, and tech needs. Do you remember Parappa the Rapper? I might be aging myself with this one, but back on the PS1, it was really the first major rhythm game that was really fun to play and unique, but was also notorious for its not exactly good explanation on its mechanics and sort of unforgiving scoring system. Sort of a common thing for games of that time. Yes, it was hard, and I personally sucked at it, but something about the art style and music really let it shine despite all of that. Obviously, since then, various booms in rhythm gaming such as Dance Dance Revolution, Guitar Hero, Just Dance, Sosu, and so on have really cemented the musical games genre. But most recently, the action rhythm subgenre has been steadily growing with the likes of Cadence of Hyrule, Metal Hellsinger, and now Hi-Fi Rush. Obviously, there are more, but why does any of this matter? Well, without spending 30 minutes diving into the nuances of video game subgenres and their development as a viable medium in gaming, it's important to note that relative to your standard action platformer or shooter or RPG, this is still a young gaming genre. On one hand, it means studios making these kinds of video games are generally more free to take bigger risks in their development, and on the other, they can at times be very one-dimensional. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I'll share off the bat, I don't particularly love rhythm games, so my bias will show here, although I'll try to be as fair as I can. So let's start with the gameplay, because to me, gameplay usually carries the most weight whenever I'm reviewing games. Hi-Fi Rush has these platforming sections, and they use these gear collectibles that serve as currency to unlock different attack combos, companion combos, and specials. That was all pretty standard but fun. It didn't really do anything to reinvent the wheel, but it didn't need to. The draw was the rhythm sections and combat that you got bonuses from for attacking on beat. Once you got a hang of following the pretty consistent rhythm of the game, the combat is pretty forgiving, and I think that's a good thing. It keeps the flow of the game going for this style. They also intentionally delay your input so attacks on screen only occur on beat. You just lose any bonuses if you didn't actually press the button on beat. A neat way of keeping things relatively accessible for the musically challenged. The game switches it up just enough during outright rhythm sequences where you have to hit the right button combo on time, and then incorporates that into boss fights. I'm a sucker for mechanics introduced via gameplay and then keeping those mechanics around throughout the entirety of a game. It worked well. The only time things felt a little off were the parrying sections. Maybe I just didn't spend enough time with it, but the visual cadence of enemy attacks didn't feel exactly on time to when you actually performed the parries. A relatively minor gripe, or maybe straight up a skill issue, but that's just how I felt. And then the companions you could call in for an assist offered for a nice continuous flow of attacks during combat, but swinging it back to the platforming, it was pretty straightforward. It's almost as if some of the sections tried to be a little puzzle-like, but didn't really do much besides slow your progress for a moment. As for the music itself, it's a rhythm game, and they did a really good job of maintaining the overall feel and tempo of the playthrough. Songs from the Black Keys and Nine Inch Nails definitely was very on brand to Chai's character and playstyle, but I wish they offered up some tempo changes or even a little bit of genre variety. You have multiple characters in the game that help you, perhaps incorporating their personalities or playstyles with different musical genres could have been a cool way to keep things fresh, because I'll be honest, I couldn't do more than like an hour at a time with the same exact 4 on the floor beats cycling for the entire game. The audio design was also not bad, but a part I definitely wish they took some more risks on. Hi-Fi is in the title after all. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh here as a music lover and audiophile. There are some cool payoffs with your cat companion, who is very coolly named 808. I love that. But after the initial wave of musical freshness, I found myself just going into automatic mode, at least on the music and gameplay side. There was a ton of talk on the internet about Forspoken's kind of cringy dialogue, and if you follow the DMGT on TikTok, you totally should, links in the description. You'll know that I specifically called that out as something I didn't personally resonate with, and the case is pretty much the same here with Hi-Fi Rush on the story side. I get it, this is a very different game presenting itself in a much more goofy and cartoony manner intentionally, but it's got that anime type writing that I'm just not into. If that's your cup of tea, that's chill. I'm not calling it bad per se, I just didn't like it. Chai, the main character, straight up grinded my gears with his almost Disney Channel-like delivery. I'm not going to spend a ton of time bashing on this because it's very much a personal preference thing, but that's kind of the point of a review of any media format, right? Sometimes this type of writing works. Like, I actually enjoyed 808's mannerisms and Cinnamon's almost dry humor delivery. Everyone on the voice acting side did their job well, delivered the script as intended. The story is nothing crazy. A sort of classic aloof kid gets sucked into a situation against a big bad corporation, and they toss in some emotion away to keep things just compelling enough throughout. And then, on the flip side, the visuals and the art style. Hands down the strongest part of this game. Do any of you remember Viewtiful Joe? Another game I'm aging myself with, but it came out on the GameCube in 2003 and had this very cool comic book style animation with the thick black permanent marker character outlines, action movie slow motion sequences, beat 'em up gameplay, and smooth cutscene to gameplay transitions. This description is almost one-to-one Hi-Fi Rush. In some ways, it almost feels like a spiritual successor, and it kinda makes sense. Masaki Yamato, who is the lead game designer on Hi-Fi Rush, happened to direct Viewtiful Joe 2. I do my homework. Takes all of that and brings it to 2023. Hi-Fi Rush has some of the cleanest visuals and animation, not just in the game, but you could almost compare this to an animated film or high production anime. On top of the aforementioned inspiration, it also clearly took cues from a Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse during cutscenes with the comic book style still frames, textured lighting and backgrounds, halftone dots, and so on. To do all of that and then pretty much seamlessly transition between the pre-rendered animations and into the gameplay was very cool to see. I mean, just look at this example most people are talking about.
That's as far as you go, punk!
Tuck and roll, Chai.
What? Well,
All of this continues on during boss fights and key moments in the game. Despite the story and dialogue I wasn't resonating with, the animation is what sucked me back in and was just a pleasure to experience. Bright colors, distinct feel to the levels or missions as they're called, it all had character and it remained crisp. Tango Gameworks had fun with these visuals and it really paid off. As I mentioned at the start, it didn't quite do enough for me to put it in the Game of the Year nomination realm, but it's not a hill I die on if someone wants to make a case for why it should be a nominee at least. All in all, I think Hi-Fi Rush has laid the groundwork for future iterations of this game and formula, should they decide to follow this up with a sophomore effort, but it's a fun game, it's worth your time, I enjoyed my time playing with this, so I give Hi-Fi Rush a 3 out of 5. Hey, thanks for getting to the end of the video. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. If you have any thoughts on my arguments here, leave it in the comments. Feel free to subscribe if you so choose. If you're waiting on my review of the DualSense Edge controller, that is coming this week, so thanks for being patient with me. I'm no longer sick. Also, feel free to keep leaving just the word farts as a comment in the comment section because I think it's funny. I think a couple of you did that in some of my previous videos, and it's hilarious to me, so please go ahead and do that. Here are some other videos you can watch, and then subscribe to the channel if you want. Okay, thanks.